Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton. Time for the Saturday morning conversation with Rod Babers and CJ Vogel of On Texas Football. Thanks for tuning in. On Texas Football, this episode brought to you by our friends at MyBookie. Make sure you're in the game with MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Rod and CJ, Longhorns host Florida later today. The Florida Gators have all kinds of concerns at quarterback. Clearly, they're going to be run-oriented today. I think all of us would agree with that. Texas has had a fairly stout defense this season. What are y'all's takeaway on this game? Is it Texas's offense has to get underway against the Florida defense, or is it the Texas defense stopping that Gator offensive run game? What are y'all's prevailing thoughts? Rod, I'll let you go first.
I feel like this game is more about the offense. And honestly, I just feel like we never give the defense enough credit and we never talk about the defense enough. But, I mean, that is statistically you can say it or you can just talk about it from a debate standpoint. That's the best defense in the country, guys. That's how good the Texas defense is. So I have all faith that the Texas defense will take care of business. I doubt that Florida can march the length of the field and score a lot of points. Especially with all the injuries for Florida on that side of the ball, and that Texas defense coming off the performance last week versus Vandy. I feel like they believe, even though we know why it was a lack of complementary football, they believe Vandy scored too many points on. They gave up too much to Vandy because they're a very stingy defense. Number 2 scoring defense, I believe, right now in college football. Number 1 total defense, number 1 pass defense as well. They know, I think, Florida's going to try to run the football, so they'll stack the box, and I believe they're confident their DBs can hold up on the outside. This game is about the offense to me. Sark even talked about it. They implied they lost their mojo along the way somewhere offensively. And I think this is the mojo game. This is to get the mojo back. And I think a lot of that mojo that he's referring to, I think it sits with the offensive line. I think the burden of that mojo, whether it be the pass protection issues they've had the last couple of games, whether you're talking about the push in the run game because the run game has just been average during this stretch. There's nothing really extraordinary about the run game lately. I think Sark wants to get the mojo back, and I think he means explosive plays, and I think he means the offensive line playing at a high level. Remember, they were in the conversation for the Joe Moore Award. That ain't happening. I mean, not right now. A Joe Moore award-winning offensive line doesn't give up 11 sacks in 2 games. So they got to get back to playing at that high level. So I think this is about the offensive line for me. How they got to have their bounce back game. Quinn had his bounce back game. Where's the bounce back game for the offensive line? This is, I think, a more than capable opponent in Florida. They got great athletes. Sark even said it. They got really good athletes on both sides of the ball. I want to see what the O-line does in this game, considering what the expectation and standard we had for that O-line was. I mean, this is a group, guys. They got more continuity probably than any other group on that 40 acres, in that locker room. They got 2-3 NFL players on that offensive line right now. And I think it's fair to say they've underachieved the last couple of games.
What do you think, CJ? Are you more looking at the offense or the defense in this game as a harbinger of what's to come for the Longhorns?
Yeah, I'm all about the offense in this game. And this is, you talk about the mojo back, you talk about confidence back. You got 2 opportunities to find some sort of rhythm before this just becomes who you are this year for the Texas offense. And right now, who the Texas offense is not going to be good enough to win an SEC championship or win the national championship, which I would believe is the goal with this amount of talent on the roster. Listen, Devin Moore, Jason Marshall, they're out. These are the top 2 cornerbacks for Florida. There's 4 guys listed out from the secondary coming into this game. There's a 5th one that's questionable. You got to sit around and think, all right, how can we move the football through the air vertically? That has to be the goal. That has to be a big focus and emphasis. But in that same breath, you say, hey, don't go too far from what gets you quick yardages. And that's the quick screen game, right? With Florida and with this defense specifically, they miss about 12 tackles a game. That's quite a bit. They're up to 95 tackles missed on the season per Pro Football Focus. Texas has missed 20 less tackles the entire season. So that's quite a difference when it comes to getting the ball out to Isaiah Bond, to Matthew Golden, to DeJoundre Moore, Silas Bolden. These guys in space will be able to create after the catch. But we want to see that vertical passing attack against inexperienced secondary guys, and this is the opportunity to do so. Again, I mentioned that Arkansas down the road. That game will be another opportunity. We just saw Ole Miss last week throw for 515 and 6 scores. If you can't do it against Florida, you can't do it against Arkansas. I'm just afraid that's who your offense will be. So this is going to be the big game for me at home to come out early, start early, score early, get up early. Don't let Florida hang around, because right now I don't think they have much fight after that Georgia game. Coming into another physical matchup, that's going to be a lot to ask for a competitive game 2 weeks in a row.
On the road, too, by the way. On the road. That's, Rod, that's important, because Texas home today, obviously here in Austin. Favored by 21.5 points. Game starts at 11 o'clock on ABC. You guys know that. I want to say this. You mentioned his name, CJ, Isaiah Bond. What does he do? Because even against Georgia, he was only half go, really, for half the game, then out for Vanderbilt. What does his reintroduction to the lineup mean to the Longhorns right now, who are, frankly, looking for a spark in the passing game? I'm going to take the separate way than you guys. I look at the Texas defense needing to be the real leader of this game. And the reason I say that, and this is the Texas defensive stats here versus the Florida offense. Look, Florida's quarterback situation is what it is. Texas is going to deal with it and go from there. But Texas is still only giving up 11.5 points per game, no matter who's anybody's quarterback is. So I think that this is a game where if Texas can stop the run and not let Florida make it a bunch of third and shorts like they tried to do and were successful against Georgia, by the way, quite a bit. This is a game where the defense can eat. And I want to see Texas become an elite and continue to be an elite defensive team. I think the offense has already shown us a lot of who they already are, guys. I think that's my takeaway. I don't think this is the best Texas offense since XYZ. I think they're kind of who they are already. So
yeah, I agree with that. If there's one reason to be optimistic about maybe a reintroduction to the passing game, listen, Isaiah Bond's going to be 100%. As you mentioned earlier in this show, Bobby, I wanted to go real quick about his game log, just his statistics before and after the injury. He had not been under 50 yards before the injury, excuse me. Since the injury, 3 catches, 16 yards. That's over the Georgia game where he clearly wasn't 100%, and the Oklahoma game where he was not a big part of that second half, obviously, because of the foot injury suffered in the second quarter. 74 yards, 75 yards, 103, 51, and 61. A lot of those games came in blowouts where the targets weren't necessarily there. Tougher competition. He's going to be the focal point. I'm thinking that's the key that unlocks some big-time yardages down the road for the Texas Longhorns. And, man, would it be welcomed. I'm telling you right now, I would love nothing more for that Quinn to Bond connection to open up down the field and this offense really gets going.
I love the stats there, CJ. Thank you for bringing them up. Texas in this game, according to my bookie, favored by 21.5 points. Again, 11 a.m. on ABC. Hey, guys, we want to say thank you to my bookie, our sponsor, for every Saturday morning conversation. With all the excitement of this season, make sure you're in the game with my bookie. Bet any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and take advantage of weekly risk-free bets. The best part is you can do it all, anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone. Visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTEXAS to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year anniversary, and they're rolling out the red carpet for you guys. Bet big and bet confidently with risk-free Thursdays. If your boosted bet doesn't hit, you get your money back. Weekly no-sweat win-win bets all season long. And sign up now using code ONTEXAS to cash in on a double deposit bonus. It's a no-brainer. Double the cash in your account before you even place your first bet. Do not wait because it's only available for a limited time. For those of you who've been playing with MyBookie for some time, they've also got something for you as well, a new loyalty rewards program in MyBookie Plus. It's simple. The more you play, the more you earn. And as you progress through the tiers, you unlock exclusive promotions, epic giveaways, and cash back in your account. Again, that's MyBookie.ag. All right, let's look around the SEC, if you will, guys, both CJ and Rod, and talk a little bit more about these big games on ABC. I mean, you got to admit, this is a slate that just about anybody would love to see. 2:30 game, Georgia Ole Miss after Texas Florida, then Bama LSU, the night game. Let's start, if you don't mind, actually with the Georgia Ole Miss game. Georgia favored by 2.5. They waded through a muddy win over Florida last weekend. Now they go to an Ole Miss team that, I mean, they launched an aerial attack on Arkansas last weekend. Which way y'all seeing this game right now? Because my bookie's got it at 2.5 points in favor of Georgia, even though it's at Ole Miss. Any thoughts on this one?
Everything about this game screams I should be taking the physicality of a Georgia defense versus kind of that cute, trickery of a Lane Kiffin offense, right? And I've not seen a lot out of the Ole Miss defense recently that leads me to think that they're going to create as much success against Carson Beck. Now, he's been turning the ball over everywhere, but the point being, I like the Georgia defense to really come in and stand tall in this offense. We saw how well they were able to game plan for Texas. They had a week off coming in that game, but right now I think you got to go with Georgia until proven otherwise. If I'm wrong here, hey, next year we'll reevaluate. But it just feels like the styles of play favor Georgia over Ole Miss right now.
Rod, is the quarterback going to throw too many interceptions, though?
Yeah, that honestly, the only thing keeping me from just confidently picking Georgia is the way Carson Beck is playing. Because I got faith. If I'm comparing Kirby Smart and Lane Kiffin, I'll take Kirby Smart. The standard of college football, Georgia versus Ole Miss, and their NIL experiment. I'll take Georgia and what they're building. But watching Carson Beck the last few weeks, guys, he is a liability at quarterback. Hell, he could have thrown 2 more interceptions last week versus Florida. I'm going to take – and honestly, that defensive line, you're right, Ole Miss's defense, they haven't been as down. They still lead, I believe, the Power 4 in sacks and pressures. So combine that with how bad Carson Beck is playing, man, it could be a formula for disaster. I'm going to take Kirby Smart because I'll take Kirby Smart's football and brand of football over kind of what CJ was mentioning there, over Lane Kiffin's version and brand of football. But, man, I think it could be way too close for comfort. And I would not doubt if they're on upset alert deep in the fourth quarter just because the way Carson Beck starts the game, if he starts it playing the way he's played so far in the last month or so.
I got to ask y'all. So y'all are both taking Georgia?
Yep.
I think Ole Miss is going to get on top of them early.
Yeah.
And force Carson Beck into bad situations. So that if you recall, Florida got on top of Georgia early. Yeah, and Georgia didn't look good in comeback mode. But Florida didn't have the horses to finish it off. I think Ole Miss does because their defensive front does get after a Carson Beck a little bit better. So I'm going opposite of you guys. I'm taking Ole Miss in that game. By the way, we didn't say which way we were going to go with Florida, Texas. We got to talk about that at the end of this show as well, as far as whether or not the Longhorns are going to win and or cover. All right, Bama LSU. Next piece to this. LSU, it's at night, 6:30 p.m. kick on ABC in Death Valley, right? But Alabama's favored by 2.5. Y'all, I don't know which way to go. Alabama does not have the pass rush that A&M put on Garrett Nussmeier. Y'all agree with that? I'm going to just say it. I'm going with LSU in this game. Because I don't know that Alabama has an identity outside of their run game. Big play with Ryan Williams and Jalen Milroe connecting downfield, but other than that, their passing game is very rudimentary. LSU, I think, has an identity on offense at least. So I'm going with the Tigers, which would put Alabama likely out of the college football playoff. This is a quote unquote knockout game. One of these two teams are not going to make the playoffs, even though they already have 2 losses on the season. What are y'all thinking here? Rod, I'll let you go first, buddy.
Yeah, man, tough to pick against LSU at home. I'm with you on that.
That's 6:30 at night too.
Yeah, night game too. They've had some issues with dual threat quarterbacks that can move, and Jalen Milroe is one of the best in the country. That concerns me a little bit for LSU. Go back to Marcel Reed. Go back to Sellers from South Carolina. Both of those guys kind of lit them up. Man, This is a tough one. I'm going to go Bama. I'm going to switch it up. I'll go Bama. I think, man, they can win it in a game-winning field goal, fourth quarter drive kind of thing. I think Jalen Milroe gives LSU fits. I just do. That's my take.
I mean, that's kind of the big question. Both teams are coming off of buys. LSU's at home. LSU's at night. Who are you rocking with? I've got to rock with LSU here. Listen, before the A&M game and even after, I think I'm still pounding the drum for Garrett Nussmeier to be the top quarterback in the SEC this season. You know, I think he's played at that level. I know that second half against A&M wasn't great, but to Bobby's point, Alabama doesn't have the horses up front that Texas A&M does. And I think that's kind of come to show a little bit, right? Remember, Vanderbilt was able to kind of dominate that game with the time of possession, with the front against Alabama. I'm not saying it's going to be similar to that, but I'm thinking that the horses that A&M were able to ride through to victory are not going to be in the stable for Kalen DeBoer this weekend. I like LSU. I like Garrett Nussmeier. I like that the week in between that A&M game and Alabama, if you're LSU, you're sitting there, stop the QB run, stop the read option, contain the quarterback, keep eyes on the quarterback, because that was an issue, as y'all said, against Lenora Sellers. That was an issue against Marcel Reed. I mean, all sorts of issues prevalent against LSU's defense and the running quarterback. You had 2 weeks to get it right. Let's see if they could do it. Coach Baker, the defensive coordinator over there, smart guy. I imagine he's got a trick or two up his sleeve. I'm rocking with LSU.
I will say this. So Sellers surprised them a little bit, right? LSU. Because he's a new starter for them. He had at South Carolina started Spencer Rattler a year ago. So new quarterback. LSU shut down Connor Wegman and basically forced him into backup duty in the first half. And then they hadn't seen the zone read all year. And all of a sudden, A&M rolls that out and they have no clue how to defend it. To CJ's point, you know, I agree with Rod and this is this issue. I agree with Rod that LSU has had some issues there, and I agree with CJ. I just feel like with the week off, they've got to have a solution. I mean,
have to.
You just think it, but I will say this: never count out Alabama. I mean, if they've told us anything, even though Nick Saban's gone, you know, 70% of that team is still Nick Saban players. Yeah. They got good guys over there that can go. All right, other games in the SEC worth mentioning. Mississippi State goes to Tennessee. The Vols favored by 24. South Carolina goes to Vandy. South Carolina only favored by 4.5. So Vandy continues its little run. But the other one I wanted to talk about is our friends over at Norman in Oklahoma. They go to Missouri. And this is an interesting game because if Oklahoma doesn't win this one, they're not going bowling. There's just I see no chance of them. And Oklahoma is actually favored in this game today by 3 points, according to my book and all the lines out there. My question to y'all is, how are they favored? And do y'all have any trust whatsoever in that Oklahoma offense to actually pull out a victory in Columbia? I mean, I can't believe they're favored. I'll just put it out there. I know Missouri's got quarterback issues, but man, this was supposed to be a big year for Eli Drinkwitz. It's at Missouri, and it's not turning out to be that way unless they win today.
Yeah, the issue with Missouri is a big game. Do they show up? So far this year, they've done anything but. Right, you know, you talk about 41-10 loss on the road to Texas A&M. Alabama comes in, beats you 34-0. This was supposed to be the year, right? They were a top 10 team coming into the season. They had just won a big bowl game over Ohio State last year as well, and it's just not lived up to it. It's a soft football team. Now, does Oklahoma have anything that can cause issues? I would say coming off of that Maine game, and again, I know it's Maine, but that was the best looking offensive version of Oklahoma this season. And they did so with the ground game that had previously been non-existent. Yeah. And you take the ball out of Jackson Arnold's hands. I think you'd prefer to do that at times, especially on the road in Missouri. So I like Oklahoma in this game. That's crazy to say with how poor that they've looked at times this year. But that line's moved for a reason. And they become, you know, a 3-point underdog to a 3-point favorite for a reason. I just think this Missouri team just doesn't have it in the trenches where that Oklahoma identity defensively can at least make life very, very difficult moving forward in that game for Brady Cook if he goes.
Yeah. Hey, I've got to say this, Rod. This is something I've mentioned to Jerry back in the preseason. Barry Odom was the defensive coordinator and then the ultimate head coach at Missouri.
Yep.
And he really lined up some really good defensive players, whereas Eli Drinkwitz is more of an offensive coach.
Yep.
Well, Drinkwitz has now been there, I believe, 4 years. And last year was Odom's last year of defensive recruits.
Mm-hmm.
You ever see that where, you see a defensive head coach leave and he leaves some good players on that side of the ball. The offensive coach kind of comes in, rejuvenates the offense, and uses some of those defensive players to kind of lift up the team as a whole. And it's a little bit of a charade, or there's like a facade to the Missouri program right now because of that, I think.
No, it's a good point. It was almost just it was the perfect balance that he had struck with his offensive acumen and intelligence and his offensive system, and then the defensive presence. And like you said, what was left over of that residual Barry Odom culture there. And now it's all gone. And now he's probably struggling, trying to figure out how to replicate that in his own way. So I'm with you. I and it's still ranked, by the way. Missouri's, I believe, in the 24th or something like that in the college football playoff rankings.
Yeah, somehow.
I'm gonna go Missouri. I just can't watching that Oklahoma offense. I didn't watch them versus Maine. I'll admit that. But man, that was the worst offense in the Power Four just a couple of weeks ago. So we'll see but I'll go with, man, I don't know how they're favored. I'll just go with Missouri because I don't know how the hell Oklahoma scores points.
On top of that, Rod, I posted the points per drive earlier this week on Texas Football, the updated look at what that graph looks like in the SEC. Oklahoma's dead last in points per drive scored offensively. They were 117th nationally. Kind of gives you an idea of just how horrid that offense had been coming into this weekend.
It's crazy.
Well, CJ, yeah, it is bad. See, the question I have for you is, did they just dumb it down against Maine? Like sometimes teams that are wholly ineffective, like OU was on offense for the better part of the season, really.
Yep.
They just dumb it down and run 10 plays instead of 25, and maybe you have a chance against a team like a Missouri, where you're not going to have to score 30 against Missouri to win. You're just not. I mean, you're really trying to score 17 to 24 to win that game.
I agree.
Is that a fair assessment?
It's one of those things where, we talk about it here, paralysis by analysis. Well, the same thing goes for a quarterback trying to diagnose in his first real, year starting. And we saw the switch. We thought maybe that could be a solution for Oklahoma, and it just clearly was not. So to come back with them, it tells me one thing. All right, the other guy wasn't the option. Let's go back to what he did well with Jackson Arnold and just stick to that. And we saw that a little bit with the deep throws down the sideline and the short, quick screens. And that was basically about it.
I can't believe I'm getting ready to do this, but I'm going to say I'm going with Oklahoma in that game.
Wow.
Which way, Rod, you're going with Missouri?
I'm going with Missouri.
Yeah. Which way, CJ?
I'm going Oklahoma. I think that Missouri team is awfully soft.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that's going to do the SEC portion. There are some national games of note, and I want to get into them. First, I want to show y'all what we're going to be doing this weekend or later today, actually. Not only are we doing the Saturday conversation right now, we've got the tailgate live from the tailgate. Please come join us out there over on the LBJ lawn next to the stadium. That starts at around 9:30, just a couple hours from now. I'll be out there. Then we have the Watch With Us. That starts at around 10:45 a.m., 15 minutes before pregame. Aaron Hogan will be hosting that. Rod Babers, Bob Shipley, Jerry Hamilton all join. Then the postgame live, myself, Rod Babers. I think Brian Robeson is going to be out for this one today because he's his Little League team is in the playoffs. Congratulations to him. That's going to be sponsored by our friends over at Yingling Flight. Thanks to all of our game day sponsors, by the way, including my bookie, South Point Dodge, Hargrove Roofing, Viking Fence, and our friends over at Flat Creek Estate. All right, games outside of the SEC and the Texas game, guys. I'm looking at it. There's a couple of different ones that I want to go over. I'm particularly looking at ones that might impact Texas on a national scale, okay, in the college football playoff. For example, Georgia Tech has been okay this year at times, right? Okay, they host Miami. Now, Miami's an 11-point favorite. Cam Ward's playing well. The whole team's playing better. But That's not a turn the TV off game. You might have to check the score in the third quarter, right? Yeah. That game, BYU, listen to this, BYU, which is ranked and undefeated, they go to Utah. That's that's the Holy War.
The Holy War.
Yeah, that's BYU is undefeated. Utah can't bust a grape right now. And BYU is only favored by 3.
That's crazy.
I mean, right? I mean, these are games. Michigan goes to Indiana. Indiana's undefeated. Indiana favored by 14. What a difference a year makes between those two teams. I mean, you can't hardly believe that. Nevada goes to Boise. Boise's favored by 24. That shouldn't be really interesting. And then we have a couple others in the state of Texas that I think are not. The game's not in Texas, but Colorado goes to Texas Tech. That one is, but TCU to Oklahoma State. Y'all want to take one or two of those games and say what you think about those? CJ, I'll let you start, buddy.
Yeah, that TCU Oklahoma State game. I mean, talk about the most disappointing bowl game or game of the year. Those two teams came in with sky-high expectations. TCU trying to bounce back to where they were in 2022. Oklahoma State, I had money on them on my bookie to be the Big 12 champion of the year. They returned 21-22, and I don't think they're going to win a conference game this year. So two disappointing teams there as well. What's going to be an interesting game in terms of Texas's playoff resume and the implications that might have there is, listen, Indiana's a really, really good team this year. If they go out there and they they just dominate Michigan, that doesn't help Texas. And I hate to play that whole game of resume and who do you want to win and who helps who. I hate to do that, but in a situation like this where a one-loss Texas and an undefeated Indiana might be fighting for what could be a final home seed, that common opponent is going to be an important game. And listen, with the way that Indiana's rolling right now, 14 might be about 28. And folks that have followed me on Twitter for a while, they know that we go to the bank and we make some money with Indiana team total every single week. And so we're doing it again this weekend.
I guess we'll see. Rod, any game in particular interesting to you in that category?
Yeah, I mean, I know that that Georgia Tech Miami game, Georgia Tech's been dealing with an injury to Haynes King the last couple of weeks. It's a big part of why, wherever his status is it's going to be a big part of if they can, pull off the upset there over Miami. And Miami hadn't really been tested. Some people saying the same thing about Indiana, that Indiana hasn't really been tested, to your point, CJ, and may not necessarily be tested until they get to the postseason or to the championship round. So, looking around college football, like I said, I still don't see any elite teams, and that includes Texas, by the way. And it offers so much opportunity for somebody to separate down here late down the stretch. Hopefully it's Texas that starts to separate and look a little bit different than everybody else.
I'm surprised neither of you picked the Colorado-Texas Tech game. Colorado favored by 4 in Lubbock, 3:00 on Fox, by the way, if y'all want to watch it after the Texas game today. Look, I don't know that I trust Deion Sanders or Joey McGuire to lead me through a conference. So we'll see if Shedeur Sanders has enough for the Red Raiders. I think I can rely more on him, the quarterback Shedeur Sanders, than I can Joey McGuire. His team has been so up and down all year. But you never know. You never know. All right, last thing we got to talk about is the Texas-Florida game. We didn't actually give our picks on the over-under and the win-loss and our final score. So, Rod, I'm going to start with you. Give me your final score for Texas-Florida.
Man, I'm going to go 34-10. I don't even know how Florida's going to score that 10. But I think they'll get 10. I'll give them respect and say they get 10. But I'll go 34-10. That means Texas covers the number, and I think the offense, has a bounce back performance, gets some of that mojo back.
Yeah.
CJ?
I like Texas 38-13. Listen, that would be 5 touchdowns. You haven't seen that in a game since Mississippi State. It's been quite a while, but this is the opportunity for the Texas offense to gain back that mojo against a depleted secondary. You're at home. It's at 11 a.m. Quinn normally plays well in these situations. Got to protect them. You get Isaiah Bond back 100%. I'm liking the offense to find its mojo back. 13 points. We'll see about that. But 38-13, we're locked in.
I can only see Texas getting up that big, guys, if there's a defensive touchdown. I think that this defense – I think the offense has kind of shown us who they are. I go back to that. And I know that that's not going to be what all Texas fans want to hear. And I hope like hell I'm wrong. I'll just put that out there. But I'm going 24-13 Texas. So I think Texas' offense right now a little anemic, and I think some people have figured it out. And until or unless Sark and Quinn Ewers are able to really execute on a high level, I'm staying in that 20 range. Unless again, special teams touchdown or defensive touchdown. By the way, if we are looking for one thing for in favor of Florida, their punter is tremendous. By the way. So keep that in mind. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of Saturday Conversation. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you come back again at 9:30. We're going to have the Texas tailgate party there a little bit. Also, thank you to our sponsor, mybookie.ag. That's mybookie.ag. Bettors line up and feel free to use them and use code ONTEXAS for a 100% match. For Rod Babers and CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. Hook 'em horns. Let's go get them today, guys.
Hook 'em.